The Shadow, Dead Water, Past Now. Read presents another fictional work in our anthology of stories that need to be told. The Shadow, Dead Water. If you have a story that needs to be told, email it to stories@PastNowRead.com. If you like this story, stay tuned each Friday evening for the next episode. Now, The Shadow, Dead Water. Enjoy. Two dead in the Sound. The first body came up at dawn, bloated and white, hauled over a gunwale by hands that had done it 1,000 times and never like this. The second broke the surface at dusk, tangled in his own net, jaw locked as if arguing with the water that killed him. No shark bites, no rope burns, just skin coming off in ragged peels and eyes filmed to milk. At Singing River Hospital, they whispered the word people cling to when nature needs a villain. Negleria fowleri, brain-eating amoeba, rare, tragic, clean. A narrative that sells sunscreen and caution. But the air told a different story. When I slipped through the ER wall, the smell hit hard. Not rot, not river. Metallic, sweet, like plastic held too long in fire. The men's hands were ringed with blister bands exactly where gloves had been. Their shirts were spotted with pinholes, little cautions burned through cotton. The sheriff practiced his lines by the nurse's station as if he could make them true by repetition. A state health rep guarded a white cooler like treasure and set it on the counter without letting it touch the lab bench. A doctor initialed a form without reading. The form did not mind. I drifted back to the marina. The water wore a polish of moonlight, but beneath that sheen, the current writhed black as printer's ink, refusing to mix. On the pier, a woman in a man's jacket stood unmoving, lips cracked from salt and prayer. "He said the mud climbed the line," she whispered, when she finally noticed the colder patch of dark beside her. "Said it wasn't right. Said it burned through the gloves." In the bait shop, a corkboard held a photograph no one had bothered to take down. A forklift at sunset, a dented drum tipping toward the tide, the letters on its side half swallowed by glare. Herbicide orange. A chart on the wall circled coordinates with pencil scars. Beside them, a Coast Guard bulletin warning small craft to avoid active dredging. Amoebas don't travel in drums with stencils. The amoeba story. By morning, the story had uniforms and a podium. Cameras blinked along the seawall. The wind fussed at flags while men in short sleeves rehearsed concern. "Rare amoeba outbreak," the governor's aide said into 3 microphones at once. "Heat-related, contained." The sheriff nodded like a metronome. A Department of Defense liaison stood 2 paces back, pretending not to exist and failing at it. Behind the cameras, the choreography was cleaner. Media packets laid out like communion wafers, bullet points in the same font mailed to every newsroom, a quiet request to focus on swimming safety. Nothing about dredging, nothing about drums, nothing about history that hadn't stayed where it was buried. Nature doesn't smell like the inside of an old battery. The breeze did. At the morgue, the shelves that should have held 2 men were emptier than a lie. Forklift tires had left curved streaks on the tile as if drawing parentheses around nothing. The manifest said the bodies were transferred to the state lab in Jackson. The manifest also forgot the driver's name, the time, and the plate number. The way memory forgets what it never wanted to know. The coroner sat at his desk with the posture of a man who had been shrinking for years and finally ran out of height. He didn't see me, but his eyes found the corner where I darkened the paint. They said hysteria would kill the coast, he told the empty room, because sometimes the empty room is safer than the people in it. Said chemicals were legacy materials and legacies don't hurt the living. His laugh sounded like a paper cut. They showed me my pension file on a screen and made my name vanish. Then they typed it back, like a magic trick. I got the message. From his drawer, he pulled a Polaroid as if the photograph had been cooling there for decades. Two young men in aprons grinned on a dock in 1968, shoulders bare to the sun. Behind them, stacked drums bleeding orange down their seams. On the back, in grease pencil, shipment A, ranch hand residuals. Outside, a refrigerated truck idled with no logo and fewer scruples. Stainless walls inside. Toe clamps on the floor. Room enough for truth to take a one-way ride. The dead weren't going to a lab. They were going to a place records cannot follow. The bottom bleeds. Truth sinks. If you want it, you go low. I slipped under the sound where the dredge's teeth had chewed the bay into a geometry that suited shipping more than shrimp. Down in the brown, the water lost track of its color and the bottom became a language. The silt spoke in pictures scratched by pressure and time. Summer of '67. Men in short sleeves smoking while forklifts bucked under weight. A drum dropped, its lid sprung, a hiss like a snake hiding in an engine. A supervisor pointing at the tide and saying waste, not with the casual confidence of a man who has never met a ledger he couldn't cook. Storms layered their own handwriting on top of that. Hurricanes tucked poison into marsh grass, carried it into nurseries where oysters fattened and shrimp learned to swim. Enough time passed to dull memory and sharpen appetite. Then the dredge came back, teeth bright as a promise, and tore the quiet open. That is what climbed the fishermen's nets. Half a century of math finally being solved in public. Near midnight, a barge slid out from behind a spoil island, quiet as guilt. Not the rusted contractor kind with coffee cans for ashtrays. Matte gray steel. Crew in clean coveralls. Rifles slung casual, as if habit is an alibi. They weren't guarding machinery. They were pruning witnesses. A smaller skiff nudged alongside. Paperwork so pristine it reflected stars. Boxes moved. Signatures traded hands. A thermal printer exhaled labels that stuck like euphemisms. Remedial soil. Classified. Organic residual. Burn. Words that sounded like cleanup and meant deletion. The crane lifted a clamshell of bottom, and it bled black across the deck. Where drops struck paint, bubbles formed and chewed inward like mouths. One fleck passed through me. Pain found me anyway. White blanked the world and then receded, leaving the outline it always leaves. Mine, etched sharper. The captain stood at the rail and talked into a phone that had more clearance than any human soul. Containment holding, he said. Media aligned. Disposal accelerated due to weather. He didn't mention the smell. None of them ever do. Containment of poison. Containment of truth. They always run on the same schedule. Paper shields. Newsrooms dressed the lie in graphics. A cartoon amoeba put on a villain's grin and dove for a cartoon brain. B-roll of the sound shimmered under a filter strong enough to turn oil into heat haze. Editors cut words like contamination and dioxin and left summer safety in their place. The lower third chirped, how to avoid rare amoeba. At City Hall, a developer with a powerful handshake clicked through a deck titled, Tomorrow's Coastline Today. Condos in a new pier district right where spoil banks rose like black bread. Bullet points scrolled. Public health messaging. Simplify. Amoeba. Legacy materials. Coordinate DoD liaison. Private note. Pursue speculative purchase of affected parcels before valuation adjustment. A retired general joined by video and said closure 3 times as if saying a word could do the work the word refused. Meanwhile, people with no bullet points kept breathing. The widow opened her door to a man with a clipboard and a tranquil smile. He called it a compassionate settlement and slid a check across the threshold. When she didn't reach, he left the paper there on her doormat like a trap. When she looked away, he stepped toward it. I painted his windshield with myself, a shape he could not name but recognized. His breath fogged, stuttered. The check fluttered and skittered into a puddle that left its corners orange. He backed into his car and left without his clipboard and without the feeling that the world was a simple place. A young reporter in a fluorescent newsroom watched her segment die on the editing bay, oily surf replaced with stock footage of kids on a slip and slide. She didn't argue. She hit save on her RAW twice, then copied it to a thumb drive small enough to lose on purpose and large enough to change a conversation. She circled a date in her planner and wrote 3 words under it: if they fail. Not all paper shields are thick. Some are tissue and tears. Some are bulletproof until someone reads them out loud. Storm of witnesses. The weather found its voice. The barometer fell as if someone had cracked the dial. Thunder stitched a dirty seam from horizon to horizon, and the gulf heaved against itself like an animal trying to crawl out of its skin. On the barge, men sprinted. The crane rattled. The clamshell bit the bottom faster, trying to finish a job that had never been definable as finished. Over the radio, the captain said words like expedite and secure that have meanings until they don't. Rain came warm and immediate. Fat drops tapping out the morse of panic on every flat surface. Spoil mounds slumped and opened. Black water feathered into the sound until the sound wore it like bruises. Fish spasmed on the surface. Their silver dulled to pewter and then to the color of spent bullets. A heron dragged one burning foot through shallows and screamed with a voice not built to carry pain. In stilt houses along the marsh, mothers zipped windows shut against the smell that turned the back of the throat to metal. In a church basement, men filled sandbags and argued theology versus chemistry. In the hospital, the nurse who had been quiet the longest slid a red biohazard bin behind a false panel and wrote in a marker that would bleed through: keep. Do not destroy. I stood on the barge without weight and watched the captain open a safe bolted to the deck. Inside, maps, Pascagoula Harbor freckled with X's, arrows from then to now. A folder stamped Ranch Hand, Coastal Legacy Program. Schedules with friendly language. Public narrative coordination. Amoeba. Acquisition windows. A stapled list of names with numbers beside them. Payouts, not phone lines. I can't touch paper. I can touch certainty. I spread the map across glass and steel, wave and cloud. I let him see what he was already standing inside. He flinched as if someone had fired. Contingency Foxtrot, he barked into the radio. Accelerate cover. Repeat. Accelerate. Lightning took the crane the way a judge takes a gavel. The cable snapped. The bucket dropped, hit a drum, and slit it open. Vapor rose, sweet, the museum sweet of plastic flowers, and rolled low. Men coughed, then made sounds children should never hear, and adults never forget. Panic is a chemical too. It spills fast. One deckhand ran blind and went over. Another aimed a rifle at the fog as if shooting could puncture air. The captain dragged a hose toward the drum because water is what men use when they don't know any other prayer. The storm answered with more storm. Waves slapped the hull. The barge slewed and kissed a spoil mound that wasn't a mound anymore, but a muscle tearing loose. Somewhere on shore, a siren yawned awake and rose until it hurt. In the dark under all this, the bottom continued its slow work of remembering. The ledger. By morning, the sound lay still, guilty with calm. No gulls measured the wind with their wings. No boats worried the chop. The water had the flat look of a photograph nobody wants in the family album. Officials would count what could be counted. Boats damaged, homes flooded, barrels recovered, headlines managed. They would say the word amoeba again, the way a child recites a charm. They would nod at one another and call it coordination. But the sound remembers what goes into it, and the sound has started speaking. I am what fire couldn't erase. I am the shadow stain that shows where hands were. The men who sprayed a jungle a half-world away and tipped the leftovers toward home believe in distance. The men who build condos over spoil believe in elevation. The men who write checks believe in silence. I believe in ledgers. The nurse with the red bin will keep it. The reporter with the raw footage will wait for the day when the paper shields slip. The widow will say no until no becomes a wall. The captain will dream maps he cannot fold small enough to hide. When reckoning comes, it won't look like punishment. It will look like arithmetic finally done. The sound has opened its book. I will turn the pages, and when I find the signatures, I will read the names out loud. You have been listening to The Shadow, Dead Water, produced and adapted for audio narration by PastNowRead. Stories that need to be told. If you have a story that needs to be told, email it to stories@pastnowread.com. Please subscribe, like and hit that bell for future updates. If you like this story, stay tuned for the next episode each Friday evening. Follow for more. If you like our stories, please tag with someone who may also like PastNowRead, stories that need to be told. Thank you. This was a work of fiction. Any persons, places, or things similar to real life are purely coincidental. All content and images are copyrighted by Phone House, LLC. 2025, all rights reserved.